Hi everyone, and welcome to Chapter 6, Part 2. So in the last video you guys learned about creating users and groups, and what those are and what that means in the Windows 7 environment. So this video is going to be more hands-on, and we're going to talk about what we can do with those users and groups. So the first thing we're going to talk about is local group policy objects. And then after that we're going to talk about NTFS and share permissions and how those play with each other. So let's dive right into it. First, let's talk about local group policy objects. So you may have, throughout the course of this class, created a whole bunch of users and groups. And as you might imagine, it's kind of a nightmare to have to manage all of those different different users and groups. Now imagine if you get up to, the point where you have like 100 different users and groups. Or 100, even just 100 different users. You might think, well, how am I going to manage all those settings and people? Well, Microsoft has thought of that, and they've given you some tools that you can use in order to make management of those objects, or those security objects, much easier. So with group policy objects, and that's what it's referred to as in the server environment, in the client environment, it's local group policy objects because we're dealing with the local machine. You're able to manage the settings and configuration of Windows 7 all from one management console. So for example, if you wanted to change the screensaver on all of your PCs, or even just all of your local accounts, you can do that through group policy objects. So we're going to take a look and see how you do that. So with the first thing we want to do is we want to launch our Microsoft Management Console. So we're going to type MMC and hit enter. And now we're here at a blank Microsoft Management Console. Since we already know how to do this, I'm going to go through this rapid fire. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add the local users, the group policy object snap-in. So we're going to click add, and then here it's going to ask you which snap-in do you want to add. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit browse, and then you can see here you have the ability to manage this computer or another computer, as you do with most MMC snap-ins. We're going to click the users tab though, and now you can see here we have all of the users that are on this local machine. I've created a few just for the purposes of this video, so we'll look at Billy, Bob, and Sarah here in just a few minutes. So you can see here that we have several users, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 users, and we've got two groups, administrators and non-administrators. Now at the local group policy object level, you're only able to manage administrators group and non-administrators group. But when you get up to the server environment and you're managing Windows servers, you're able to create group policy objects that map to individual groups rather than just administrative and non-administrative groups. So basically it gives you a little bit more fine-grained control. But since client machines don't typically require that much fine-grained control, they only allow you to manage administrators and non-administrators groups. So, and then in addition to that, you also have the ability to apply group policy objects to individual users as well as groups. So what we're going to do for the purposes of this video is we're going to apply a set of group policies to this Sarah user. But if we wanted to apply it for all non-administrators or all administrators, we could do that as well just by clicking these two options. But just to illustrate this, we're going to use the Sarah object here. So we'll click OK, and you can see here it says local computer /Sarah. And then we're going to click finish, and we're going to click OK. And now you can see here we have the local computer group policy objects for Sarah, that specific user account. Just to illustrate what I was talking about, if we wanted to manage other ones from this Microsoft Management Console we just created, we'll just do the same thing. We'll add another group policy, we'll go browse, and then if we wanted to manage, let's say, the Bob user, we could just click OK, we could click finish, click OK, and now we're managing the policies and settings for Bob too. So we're just going to focus on Sarah for the purposes of this video. So once you get to this point, you can click this drop down arrow and you can click user configuration, And you can see here you've got a whole bunch of different settings here. So we have software settings, we have Windows settings, and we have administrative templates. So software settings, you guessed it, deal with software. Some software has the ability to be managed by local group policy objects. Unfortunately, I don't have any installed to show you, but if it was manageable, you would show up here. We can click Windows settings, and then we've got a few other settings that we can set here. So first off, we've got log on and log off scripts. So if we want a script to run when the user logs on or logs off, we can force that here. There's a couple other options that we can set up in security settings and policy-based QoS settings. And if we wanted to set up printers that were specifically deployed to this user or this group that we're managing, we could do that as well. And then administrative templates. So this is where it actually gets a lot of fun. So you actually have the ability to manage almost every aspect of a user's computer. So just to illustrate that purpose, let's say I want to go in here and I want to decide on their desktop what desktop background they can have. So all we have to do is go administrative templates, desktop, and then desktop. And then in the right hand corner here, you can see we have desktop wallpaper. We're just going to click that, and then we'll double click it. And then this is where we can go in and we can configure the wallpaper for that specific user or group. So just going back to kind of talking about groups as in general, let's say you're a company that has a requirement where every user has to have a uniform setup and they all have to have the same desktop background. Rather than going to each one of their computers individually and assigning a desktop background, you could simply assign a group policy that sets every desktop background for all of those computers, or all of those users rather, and that would be that. So you only have to do it in one place rather than walking around to 100 different machines. Or even if it's on a local user account or just one local machine, let's say you wanted all non-administrative users to have the same desktop background, you could do that through this MMC snap-in. So for the purposes of this example, we're going to go ahead and we're going to enable that. Down here in the bottom right, this tells you what this does specifically and how to use it. In this case, this is just asking where the wallpaper is located in your file system. So we're just going to go find one. So I'm going to click Start. Excuse me, not Start. I'm going to click Explorer. I'm going to go to my pictures. Go to the sample pictures, and then I have one here, one.jpg. And if you click up here, this will get you the file path. So we're going to just copy this and we're going to paste it right into here. And we'll go slash. And then I said it was one.jpg. And we want it to fill. And we're going to hit apply and OK. And now you can see here that the state has changed to enabled. If it's not configured or if nothing's been done, it will say not configured. Sometimes you have to disable things in order to make a change. So if you wanted to disable something specific, like maybe like a printer or something like that, you could do that through group policy as well. So we've got the desktop wallpaper changed, and right now it's changed for that Sarah policy or that Sarah user. So just to illustrate what I mean, I just created this account. So typically when you create an account, you'll see this desktop background appear. But because we've used the group policy object editor here, or the local group policy object MMC snap-in here to manage that, it should show up as a flower instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to click Start, and we're going to switch users. We'll hit Control-Alt-Delete. And since we don't want to log into a domain, I'm going to type / and then Sarah. And I'll type the password. Oops, I'll attempt to type the password. And then I'll hit Login. So we'll just wait for this to log in here. And you can see here that the desktop background has changed to that picture of the pretty flower instead of the Windows 7 logo. So let's say I want to go back and I decide, well, I don't like that too much. Well, all you need to do is you log off. Then we'll log back into the account that's got that editor open. And let's say instead I want a picture of this desert. I'm going to rename this really quick and call it 2, just for the purposes of this example. So all we have to do is we have to go back in. We've got to go back to our desktop wallpaper group policy that we set up. And we're going to simply change this to 2. And we'll hit apply, and we'll hit OK. And then we'll switch user. One important thing to note is that in order to apply group policy changes, you either have to reboot the computer, or you have to or you have to log out of the user account and then log back in. So when we log back in, we'll see that the desktop background has changed to 2.jpg, which was that desert. So as you might imagine, that's just, that's one small example of how we can use group policies to manage a whole bunch of different settings on a computer or with a subset of users. Like I said, there's a bunch of different policies that you have the ability to manage. So what I'd recommend doing is going through that group policy snap-in and just doing what we were just doing there. Just play around with them and see what you can figure out. But in a nutshell, that's pretty much group policy. So again, group policy, just to reiterate, is a really, really easy way, group policy objects are really, really easy ways for you to manage a group of computers or a group of users, all from one standard user interface. So we're going to go ahead and close this, and I'm not going to save the console here. So we're going to click no. We'll close this, and we'll just go ahead and move on to NTFS permissions. So, as you discovered in your printer lab, you have the ability to manage who has access to what objects. Who has access to what printer, or who has access to what security objects on your computer. So, for example, printers, or as we'll come to see, folders. So just as a refresher, just to show you what I've done here, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open the local users and groups. And I'm going to click groups. And then you can see here that I've created an accounting group, a finance group, and an IT group. So just to keep track of this, we have accounting, finance, and IT. And in each one of those groups, we have Billy, the accountant, in finance, we have Billy and Tia. And in IT, we have Sarah. So just keep these in mind. So let's say we have the need to set up a folder that only some people have access to. Typically this is done over a network share. You'll usually run like a file server or something specific to that to sharing files. So basically what we're going to go through here in the next 2 parts is I'm going to show you the NTFS permissions and I'm going to show you the share permissions. And effectively what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this secure folder and we're going to be sharing it over a network so that other computers and devices have access to it. So what I've done is I have this secure folder, and in this secure folder we have accounting, we have finance, and we have IT. So those kind of like mirror the groups that we have created. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to assign permissions so that the accounting group, the finance group, and the IT group have access to this folder. So to do that, you'll right-click the object, which in this case is this folder. We'll click security, and then we're going to click edit. And if we wanted to add these groups, all we have to do is click add. And then I'm going to change the location here to search my laptop because they're local groups. And we'll type accounting. And you can see here that the accounting group has been granted permissions. And we'll do the same thing for the finance group. And we'll do the same thing for IT. So now basically what we've done is we've given everyone in these groups access to this folder. Down here in the bottom of this console here, you can see here that we have permissions that we can set up. Your book and the notes for this chapter go over exactly what each one of these permissions does. I'm not going to go over it in this video because there's quite frankly a lot to it, so make sure you read about those. But let's say we want to give everyone full control so that they have the access to read, execute, modify, anything we want. We're going to make sure that those three groups have full control. We'll click OK, and then we'll click OK. So one thing you need to know about permissions is the fact that they are inherited. So what I mean by that is we were able to give permissions to this folder, and then underneath that, which we have the accounting, finance, and IT folder, and underneath those folders, every object will have the same permissions that we set up for the parent folder. So just to illustrate my point, in IT, if we right click it, we'll see that we've given accounting, finance, and IT all full permissions to the IT folder. Same thing for finance. We've given finance all full permissions to this folder, along with accounting and IT. Same thing with accounting. That's been inherited. These three permissions have been inherited from this secure folder. So you might be wondering, okay, well, you've created these three groups, but you don't necessarily want to have accounting have access to the IT folder and vice versa. So what you'd want to do up here is go back, and what we're going to do is we're going to just remove those permissions from this folder. And you do that by clicking Edit, and then just selecting the group that you want to remove and clicking Remove. We'll click Remove, and we'll click Remove. And then we'll click Apply, and OK, and OK. And now we can see here that under Properties, those permissions have disappeared now. So what we're going to want to do here in this example is we're going to give accounting permission to the accountings folder, finance permission to the finance folder, and IT permission to the IT folder. So we'll go Properties, Security, and we're going to click Add, Location, we'll change it to my laptop, and we'll click IT, or we'll type IT and hit Enter, and then the IT group has been given full access to the, that's the accounting folder. And we'll say IT gets access to it. And then we'll do accounting as well. One little neat trick about this is you don't even need to type the whole name. If it's unique, like accounting, ACC, I can just click check names. Oops, excuse me. ACCOU. Maybe not. We'll just type the whole name. Sometimes you're able to get away with just typing part of the name, but clearly this isn't the case. So we'll hit OK. So now accounting and IT have been given permissions to that group. And we're going to give just IT permissions to the IT folder. Whoop. Got to change that. So you might be asking yourself, okay, so we've done this, but what if we want to give the finance group access to the IT folder, but not the accounting group? Well, all you'd have to do is do the same thing. Go back here. We'll go Security, and then we'll go Add, and then we'll say Finance. Excuse me. And then everyone in the finance group also has access. Now you might want to control what the finance group has access to, and you can do that by changing permissions down here. So for example, if you want the finance group to be able to only read what is in the IT folder, which you should probably do for non-IT personnel, then all you do is you'd set it up so that the finance group has read permissions. So it can get a little bit convoluted, especially if you're doing one-offs like this. So let's say, for example, here we have a super user. We'll call Tia. We'll say that she's like the CFO, and she needs access to everything. Well, you might go back up here, and you can see here that well, actually, let's back up here. So you can see here that at the top level, while we have different permissions in each one of these folders, it didn't get reflected back up here. And that's because it's inherited from the top down, not the bottom up. So permissions that you set at subfolders don't get reflected at permissions on folders above those. So we had secure folder and then accounting. And those permissions are specific to that accounting folder, but don't get reflected up here in secure folder. So let's say we have this one-off. It's a CFO. They need access to everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to give Tia, we'll give Tia full control for everything. Well, see, so now we have created kind of a conflict here, right? Because in the finance group, Tia has been given, she's part of the finance group, but we've set it up so that the finance group only has read permissions. So that gets a little hazy here. So what Microsoft has done, you might be asking, okay, so what permissions are applied? So the first thing you need to remember about NTFS permissions is that they're cumulative, which means that if you've given her Tia access to permissions up here and you've given her full access, but down here in this group, because she's a member of this finance group, she only has read access. Ultimately, she will have full access because it's because the permissions that you've given her are cumulative. Now that can get a little bit hazy when you have, like, I don't know, 20 or 30 folders deep worth of stuff. So what you can do, if there's ever any doubt, is you can go to Properties, Security, and then you can click Advanced, and then you can click Effective Permissions. And what this is saying is, to this specific folder, users, T-Green Desktop, Secure Folder /IT, what are the effective NTFS permissions for this specific username or group? So the user in question here is Tia. So we're going to type Tia, T-I-A. We'll check names. We'll click OK. And then you can see here that the effective permissions for Tia on this folder is basically just everything. But in contrast, her counterpart Billy should only have read permissions. And that's because he's a member of the finance group, but he doesn't accumulate any more permissions from any of the parent folders that IT is a part of. Hope that makes sense. But in a nutshell, this effective permissions tab is the easiest way to figure out what the permissions are for any one of your users. So we'll click OK, and then we'll click OK. So now that we've set up the NTFS permissions, we want to share this folder with the rest of the world, right? Or rather, the rest of our network. So to do that, we'll click Properties, and we'll click Sharing. And you've got two options here. The Share option is kind of the easier way to do it, I think, or rather the more user-friendly one, but it doesn't seem quite as powerful to me. So what I'm going to show you is the Advanced Sharing option. So we'll click Advanced Sharing, and then we can click Share this folder. And we can change the share name. So this is what it is going to show up when you try to access this computer over the network, and I'll show you that here in just a second. But this name can actually be different from the folder name if you want it to be. I usually like to keep the NTFS name, or the name in the file system, the exact same name as the share name. You also have a little bit more fine-grained control. So for example, if you want to limit the number of users that can simultaneously access that folder, you could do that there. You can add comments so they can see what they're connecting up to. And then from here, this is the most important part, you can add permissions. So share permissions differ, they're a little bit different than NTFS permissions in that share permissions, they're kind of more simple. So you've got full control, change, and you've got read. But they effectively do the same thing, which is kind of keeping people out of the network or keeping people out of where they shouldn't be. Share permissions are also cumulative, and share permissions are also cumulative, and again, they basically just do the same thing the NTFS permissions do, but they stop it at the network level rather than at the file system level. Now, usually the best practice here, because it can get really hazy once you start adding share permissions into the mix, is to give the everyone group full control, and then, give everyone group permissions to the share that you're creating, and then and then control access specifically through NTFS permissions. And again, that's just one way to kind of keep it simple. You can also run into conflicts where the share permissions are different than the NTFS permissions. So for example, if you've given that TIA user, we'll say we've given her share permissions of read, but we've given her full control for everything else in NTFS permissions. What happens is the most restrictive permissions apply in that case. So if she's trying to connect over a network, she would have problems doing anything other than reading. But if she was on the local machine, she could do everything. And that just is because she's accessing those folders over a network rather than doing it through the local file system. So again, best practice here is to just leave the everyone group completely wide open. This is everything and everyone can access it. And then you control access to everything else through NTFS permissions. So we're going to hit apply, and then we're just going to hit OK. And now you can see here that the network share is the host name. So you just type / TimVM laptop or whatever the host name of your computer is, / the share name. So just to illustrate that, we're going to just go over to Windows Explorer here. I'm going to open a new window. We're going to right click and we're going to paste that in here, and we're going to hit enter. Oh, excuse me. So that's one thing I messed up right there. Sharing, we'll go back over to advanced sharing, permissions, and then we want to add the everyone group. We'll go okay. See, previously what I had done is I removed all the permissions, and then that removed the group, the everyone group, so we didn't want to do that. So we'll click OK, and then we'll try it again. So if we just did / TimVM laptop, which is the host name, we can see here that we've got those two printers that we did in a previous video, and now we've got that secure folder share. And then underneath that we have accounting, finance, and IT. And those are all controlled via the NTFS permissions, but everything else up here is controlled through the share permissions. So if you were to, for example, if you were to set it up so that only a specific user, let's say Sarah, could access this network share, rather than giving everyone rather than giving the share everyone permissions, you'd give Sarah everything, rather than giving the everyone group full permissions to access the share, you might only give Sarah permissions to access the share. So if I was just Joe Schmo on a network and I was trying to access something and I double clicked here, if I wasn't logging in as Sarah, you'd get a prompt there, then I wouldn't have access to this folder at the share level. So that is NTFS permissions and share permissions in a nutshell. Again, they're very similar, but there's some key differences between the two, and moreover, it's really important to understand how the two of them interact with each other. So just to reiterate in this video, what we talked about is local group policy objects. We also talked about NTFS permissions, and we talked about share permissions. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, don't hesitate to email me with anything. Best bet is to always just post on the discussion boards. And I believe that is the end of the video. So again, have fun playing around with the group policy objects, the NTFS permissions and the share permissions, and I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much.